some of you might be too young for this. I remember when Loch Lomond tried to launch a range of whiskeys in the late 2000s. You might remember the other bottlings that were released at this time, the Disco Coup Glen Scotia range, or Disco Cow Glen Scotia, which had these really vibrant colors and a psychedelic looking Highland cow. They were revolutionary in a way that they were probably the ugliest release of whiskeys ever put on the market. They didn't release Loch Lomond bottling specifically at that time, but they released a range of whiskey called Inchmurin. And the Inchmurins, I think there was supposed to be a stag, but it looked like an elk. And they looked like the sort of things you would expect to find in a tourist shop in Banff. Suffice to say, some of the whiskeys were quite good. The liquid was good, but the packaging was just dreadful, and they didn't sell. So they rebranded. But I think the cool thing about Loch Lomond is that when I started in the early 2000s, and Kurt, I'm sure it was the same with you. Like at that time, Loch Lomond did not have a good reputation. It was considered like discount grocery store bottom shelf whiskey. But there were the building blocks there to create something really cool with time and patience and maybe the expertise to see what lay beneath. Because unbeknownst to most of us, Loch Lomond had basically created a self-contained blending business where they could create, like, I think a dozen styles of whiskey. Kurt, do you have the actual number there?
9. We
9.
tried different new makes from.
Yeah. And there were more previously. Like they used to make others previously. So like a broad range of malts. They distill their own grain, and they also do peated malt and unpeated malt in their column stills, which still has to be called grain whiskey, even though it is malted whiskey from a single distillery. It's a cool place, and it was built to be a utilitarian blending operation. But one of the things that's cool about it is that they created these different whiskeys with, almost like some rum distilleries do, like different ester profiles, essentially. Like some were fruitier than others. Others had spicier notes to them. And with time in, not over the top oak, some of these things have turned into some pretty cool bottlings. And I think that's the fun story that I want to tell about Loch Lomond. And I think that's why, despite the fact that our cask, the KWM cask, is nearly sold out, we're here talking about not just that cask and another one, which we're going to start with, but kind of Loch Lomond in general, because they've got a lot of cool stuff and it's different. And some of it's weird and not everyone's going to like it, but it's a very, very interesting distillery. Kurt, anything you want to add to that before we dive in here?
Sure do. I heard you talk rum. We're gonna get you on board this rum train. Some of us are
I
really
don't, Kurt. I feel the same way about rum as I do bourbon. I think it's a great spirit in cocktails.
We'll get you there. We have some sick rums, everybody.
I'm mostly just kidding. That was a comment intended to perhaps
No,
antagonize just a little bit.
you nailed it, especially regarding historical Loch Lomond last couple of decades. I can't think of another company other than maybe Ben Romick that has done such an about face. And about Ben Romick was always decent, but like they just absolutely cranked it up. But with Loch Lomond, man, you talked about those ugly silkscreen cans. That era of whiskey that was coming out of, was owned by this company, was largely rubbish. So to see where we are nowadays, and it's coming on all fronts. So you can see that there's been a change to everything they're doing there, and they've been racking up awards all over the place. But every single company that's releasing indie Loch Lomond's right now has good variants of really, really see.
Well, I mean, in some ways, I think we could probably fairly say that Loch Lomond is the archetypal ugly duckling, not just in terms of, it's what its perceived reputation was or the reputation that it had previously, because maybe it hadn't been shown in the right light. But I mean, in an industry where most distilleries have a fairly attractive place for you to go visit, even today, it's not the prettiest distillery in Scotland. It's a factory. It's an industrial site. I mean, they've got a column still there. It has its charms, especially on the inside. I mean, I think the inside is something of a cathedral, especially when you go in there. Like it's a bit science fiction-y and shiny, but it's cool when you understand what's there. So
Walking along that that graded footpath, looking down at the still room where you're like near like the level of the tops of the stills, that's such a cool.
yeah.
Still.
Well, and there's a reason for that. I mean, it's a fairly young distillery. It was established in 1965. At that time, the people building it were not thinking about the romanticism of building it, and they weren't building it with stone because that's all they had. It's a modern building, and in some ways, when you go visit like Tormore, if you get the chance, although Tormore is quite aesthetically beautiful on the outside, there's also a utilitarian industrial aspect to it too, where you're walking on catwalks way above the ground, which is quite cool. So, Kurt, you were there with some friends as well. We've both visited the distillery, and you were over there. You chose a couple of cask samples that were brought back.
Mhm.
We worked through them, and the two whiskeys we're going to start off with tonight are, uh, you know, the whiskeys that you found on that trip. So here, I'm going to just throw this quickly up on the screen. This is a little shot of the casks in the warehouse. When Sean and I were there, and I know I saw Sean, looks like he's joined us from a bar somewhere. Uh, we were on a speed trip to Loch Lomond because we had a flight to catch to London that night. So we were literally stopping there on our way back from, I'm guessing Isla, don't remember exactly where, but there's a little shot of some of your crew in the warehouse at Loch Lomond. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the casks you tried and the spirit
Mhm.
style? Because that sort of dictates what we're about to start off with here.
For sure it does. So that picture you've got there is literally the barrels that we tasted through when we chose these casks. I was mentioning earlier, we showed up there and they treated us like gold. Like this is a distillery that's not really open to the public for tours or anything. Have like a nice little office when you walk in, but it's not set up to it. They rolled out the red carpet. We started with all different styles of new make papers, 9 glasses like in front of us of crazy high test wicked stuff. We got into the warehouse and those barrels that Andrew just showed you up there. The second barrel in ended up being KWM cask that we're going to come to next. Fourth barrel ended up being a bottled club first here. When we started drinking through this lineup, one after another, it's like, holy crap! Like, why are they giving us these barrels? Like, these are incredible barrels. You know, I think it is a testament to how strong our relationships are with some of these people that they offer us like really good casks. There's no dumping of garbage. So I think 5 out of those 6 casks I would have bought down. So one of them was sherried. And when I brought the samples back, I kind of thought Andrew was going to want a sherried one because we had done a bourbon last year. Um,
Mhm.
he tried through it. And again, testament to Andrew. I love the integrity here. We tasted through them and we're like, there's no two ways about it. Bourbon ones are so much better. The sherried one, while it's a variant, and we got to go with quality for anything. So the casks are quite similar. It's the Inchmarin style, so the big fruit bomb style, lots of orchard fruits, lots of stuff. So I think we've kept everybody waiting for like
Yeah.
17 minutes. We should drink some whiskey.
Well, to be fair, Kurt, it's only been 13 because we kept them in the waiting room. But yes, we should all have a dram. If you want to grab that first glass, the first one should be the Loch Lomond cask bottled for the syndicate. Um, Kurt's description is on here. As always, never lost for words. It's one of his many talents. Um, One of the two quirks is this one's a little pricier than the Kensington one, and that's primarily due with the fact that the ABV is slightly higher. So when it was received, I mean, it might have affected the UK excise as well, but the Alberta government charges a flat fee for alcohol, which I think works out to be about $5 if it's under 60%. But as soon as you go over that, there's like a few extra dollars tacked onto it. So, Kurt, this is your cask. This is actually, I mean, since we sampled it way back when,
Mhm.
this is my first time trying it. And what I'm loving about it right off the bat is it's kind of, I got sort of like a cheesy funk to it, like maybe cheesecloth.
I get a lot of like sour juju kind of fruits, sour tangy candies from like back in the 80s to have. I get a lot of honey. I get a lot of fruits that
Mhm.
don't really have any business being in a 10-year-old whiskey. And I think we found this with our last Loch Lomond too, where we're like, we're moving into tropical territory, especially on the palate. How was that possible at 10 years old coming out of this style? But the fruits are crazy rich. I love the peachy kind of notes. I love the orangey kind of notes. And there's something that's got like sour raspberry, strawberry kind of mix to me somewhere.
Mhm. The fruits are starting to grow on me a little bit here. But I get almost like there's almost something that is like a faint, I know it's not peat, but there's almost like a barrel char to it. There's almost a faint smoky edge to it.
Toastiness,
Yeah. Lots of malt, which you'd expect. I mean, this is a young single malt.
ginger.
Yeah, there's some nice spice in there too. So, well, let's go ahead and give it a taste. No sense just sitting here nosing it all night.
A little bit heady.
What's that?
I might have been a little bit heady on that one.
Oh man, it's big, it's creamy, lush. There's some nice fruit tones there. It's floral. It still has a little bit of that like little cheesy funk to it. Um, one of the details about Loch Lomond is quite cool. I believe the fermentations are about 92 hours, something in that range. So fairly long fermentation. So that's partly where you're going to get those really intense fruity tones. But that's also where you can start to stray into some of those little bit slightly lactic notes as well too. It's not an incredibly long fermentation, but it's by the standards of the industry, this would be considered a very long fermentation.
For sure. I like Evan's kiwi note there because the kiwi and strawberry kind of have a lot of analogs. I think that tracks right with what I was thinking with this one. I like the like pink grapefruit tones that are on the palate.
Yeah.
I get that kind of funkiness you're talking about too, and it's only since you mentioned it, it actually reminds me of when you get really good, well-matured Ben Nevis that's in sherry. But if you took the sherry out of it, but still had that sort of influence, something like it's got that sourness that Ben Nevis carries. Really,
Mm. I was actually going to say there's something else this reminds me a little bit of. It reminds me, I mean, I've been lucky. I managed about 12 years ago to find, uh-oh, by Frozen.
a little bit.
Okay,
You
well,
still,
my face looks stunned on the screen. If you can still hear me, I suppose that's fine. I'm just going to turn off my other Wi-Fi here. Uh, weird. I, am I still, Kurt, am I still coming through? All I see is,
can hear you great, but maybe your portrait taker needs to work on their skill a little bit. You're kind of frozen.
I'll try turning it on here. Um,
Oh, you're good, man. You're good.
uh-oh, I'm crashing out, Kurt. I'm gonna have to close it and I'll see you in a second.
All right, we're losing the big guy. We have a couple other people here. We can probably get to step in. I see Evan just
Yeah,
chimed in with Sammy on here as well. Or you guys are just stuck listening.
yeah.
Um,
This is exciting to try because this is I think I tried it quickly at work, but this is my first time trying it proper. And you had mentioned that this was in your opinion, the better of the two. I'm looking forward to side by siding it. I love how like hot both of the casks are, but how flavorful and balanced they are at the same time. It's a
mhm.
really impressive feat to sort of balance those two things.
Yeah, I think so too. And just be clear for everybody's sake, this was not a head and shoulders kind of thing by any means. All of these casks were so neck and neck. You can talk to any of the guys that were over there with me. We actually kind of batted it around for probably an hour while we were over there, and then time when I brought samples back through in the store, we batted too. So while I have a preference that I would have happily bought any one of those casks, they were all But we were talking about it earlier, Evan. You've
Mhm.
been the biggest Loch Lomond fanboy I've known for years now. I think the society's been brilliant. We're going to come to them later for parading through some really cool Loch Lomans. But why did you fall in love with them so early?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I did not come in on those silkscreen bottles that were prevalent about a decade back. Um, Never really got into those or the Glen Scotia bottles that came in around the same time, just because they are owned by the same company. But it was partially SMWS bottlings of it, but it was what really hit me immediately was when we ended up putting a mini bottle of the Loch Lomond 18 in the whiskey calendar one year. I think it was maybe 2020 or even 2019. And the 18, it was a newer bottling of it, and it just right off the hop was just fantastic. Like, had these great citrus notes at that age. Almost had this Amaro like style of having this sweet and sour note going all the way through. Pretty big wood, but a little bit of smoke, and just was a fantastic dram, I thought, at the time. And I've revisited it a few times since they've done newer bottlings of it. I don't know if it's as good as I remember it, but it's still pretty top notch. And I found, actually, I'm looking forward to doing the 14, the official bottling. I found most of their official bottlings that are out currently and have been out over the last 3 or 4 years since they did the relaunch and sort of like washed everybody's palate of those silkscreen bottles, have all been really, really good, which is cool to see.
Yeah. Um, we should move on to the second one so we can kind of do a bit of a contrast here. Drew gets back. But speaking to all the different styles that they do, we're doing two neck and neck. They're the same style.
Yeah,
Uh,
Inchmarin.
yeah, we kind of we get asked all the time, like, what's your favorite between the two that you suggest to somebody? And it's like, well, you can ask me what my favorite child is next too. Every parent has one, of course, but we're not going to admit it out loud, at least to certain people say it out.
Yeah, that's right.
Do you have a favorite? And you don't have to just,
Child? Yeah, absolutely not. But for the two, I don't know. It's tough because there's the great thing about them is like they're 4 casks apart number wise or so, uh, and they do share a lot of the same DNA. I think yours is maybe a touch lighter on the nose with a little bit more finesse, where there's a little bit more wood creeping through on the KWM cask, but
I think you're right.
yeah, it goes a little bit more away from those what I was getting as kiwi, maybe what you were getting as strawberry, and more into the grapefruit and citrus notes for me on the KWM as well.
I get on the first one now on the sinDicate one, I'm getting a little bit of like cinnamon and pineapple now.
Well, that's a good call.
The KWM one is just a little bit bigger, a little bit richer.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I do prefer the robustness of the KWM, but there's no wrong answer between the two. And uh, again, even the official bottlings of Inchmarin that we've seen have been pretty darn good, especially for the price. Still bottled at 46% alcohol too, which is nice. But yeah, it's fun exploring, and we don't get to do it often enough. We see like screenshots of it from the SMWS with different single casts coming out in different styles from Loch Lomond. But to have a lineup like this that kind of, this doesn't even entirely showcase what the range of the distillery is, and it's hard to do it in just 7 drams, honestly, because it is to me, what makes me love it so much is just the utter madness of trying to do everything, all these 9 different styles under one roof, that contains 2 different column stills, from what I understand, 3 different pot stills, I believe, 2 different Lomond stills, I believe, as well, one jacketed and one not. Like, it's just, and then also experimenting with different yeasts, as far as I know, on top of that. Like, it's just bonkers. And the fact that they've kind of dialed it back and made a cohesive range of it, but still have these really cool one-offs that we get from independent bottlers now and then. Just really showcases what they're capable of.
For sure. I like that you mentioned how many yeasts and stuff they have too, because I know they had like tarn yeast and all this kind of crazy stuff when we were over there. And you mentioned, or Andrew mentioned, sorry, 92-hour ferments.
Yeah.
They have 20, or when we were there, they had 21 washbacks, and there were 6 more they were working. I think the new 6 were going to be stainless or something.
Cool.
New 6 were wooden, the old ones were stainless. I don't know. But they're going to be 27 washbacks on site. So the distillery makes like 25 million liters a year. 20 of that's grain, some variety, but 5 million is malt. But 27 washbacks and long ferments, like that's a ton of fun. I love this distillery's cheeky, like Wonka attitude. It's so rad.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something that I've always said about it, and all of us have said about it. It is like a Willy Wonka-esque distillery, and they could easily just like, and I think for a long time they were probably guilty of this, which is why we didn't hear a lot about them. But they could easily just take the different styles of stills and be like, okay, call it a day, and just like, well, we'll just like put all the same stuff through the same stills or whatever, or what have you, and who cares? We're just going for volume. But the fact that they tweak it here and there with the different mashes and the different styles before it even hits the still is just crazy.
We got Ferg back with us.
Hey guys, I'm back. I had to do a full restart and it took way longer than it should have, which is not promising. Where are you guys at? Did you?
We just are in the side-by-siding the two, so you haven't missed much.
Okay.
On the speed round, second time around.
What's that?
On the speed round, though, the second time around.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say before I crashed, it reminded me of like 12-year-old Little Mill from like when like I don't know if you got to try them, Kurt, but I found this stash of like 12-year-old bottlings of OB Little Mill like 12 years ago down in like Palm Springs, and I bought them all. And which was a funny story in customs. I'd also bought my wife a purse and my daughters some jewelry. So the lady at customs just said, "Aren't you a nice husband and father? Stamp. Have a nice day." But it reminds me of that. It's got a little bit of that waxiness too that you would used to get in Little Mill, especially like some of those younger, fruitier ones.
High praise.
Mm-hmm. I did put Kurt's cask, Kurt's Club cask, the sinDicate cask in the chat. I'm not sure if that was done already. That has not been available for sale to the general public until right now. So it is now available for sale to the great unwashed who are not members of Kurt's Whiskey Club, which I suppose includes myself and Evan. But it is available now for order too. Did you guys share? Sorry, Kurt?
I think there's only about 6 cases or so. It's only about 30 some bottles.
Yeah. Which is a good segue. I know you guys are side-by-siding it into the Kensington cask, because the Kensington cask, there's only about 18 bottles left as of a few hours ago. So fire that into the chat as well too. Put this up on the screen. So as we'd said before, these were sister casks. This one's slightly below 60%, 59.3. And I'm curious to hear, like I wasn't there for it, what are your comparative notes to it? Like the sinDicate, and I'm going to say Kurt's cask just because that's how I think about it in my head. But Kurt's cask I find's got quite a nice maltiness to it. Like there's more of a kind of a barley sugar presence to it. Whereas the Kensington one seems to be like a little bit softer and more floral, just right off the bat.
I think the Kensington one seems a little bigger to me still.
Yeah.
The nose is really balanced on the Kensington one. The palate is way more explosive on the sin, and a little bit more tropical, I think, on the sin.
Loads of citrus for me on the Kensington cask. A lot of like orange, maybe even a bit of grapefruit, straying into those sort of waxy starburst fruit candies. I mean, you'd expect these two things to have a lot of similarities to them. They're probably the same, from the same cooperage, filled on. Do we know, like, did you check the bottles? Were they filled on the same day?
That's a great question. I have them both downstairs, but I haven't checked them
Mhm.
side by side.
That's
I would
okay.
imagine.
We won't make you go downstairs, even though it is 27 degrees in the upstairs where you are right now.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
No, these are awesome casks. We were so lucky they were willing to part with a couple. This
Mhm.
Kensington one, I'm blown away that we still actually have bottles left, to be honest with you. So I don't imagine we'll have much left after tonight, but
No.
$8 for a whiskey like this nowadays is,
Yeah.
and these are the things you hunt out and kind of discreetly share the word because you don't want to run.
Yeah. On Facebook, Kevin Donda commented that Loch Lomond seems like the MGP of Scotland. I suppose that there might be some truth to that, except in that they're keeping most of this for themselves. Whereas like Evan would know this. Evan, does MGP have their own bottlings, or do they just make things for other people?
They do now, as of about 5 years ago. They started bottling under the name Ross and Squibb Distillery.
Okay. Doesn't sound very appealing.
Well, they also named their bourbon after a guy that murdered his wife. So that's even more appealing.
Why would they do that?
Because George Remus was a really famous, he was a guy that maybe Great Gatsby was based off of, but he did murder his first wife in a park in broad daylight.
Yeah, it seems like they could have chosen someone else to name a bourbon after, but
Yeah, you'd think so.
anyway, interesting. Thank you for that insight. There was one other comment that came in before that I meant to get back to. Jeff was asking, Loch Lomond, are they the only ones that could do a single blend? Back in the day, no. Lochside Distillery in Fort William could do a single blend. And there was at least one other. Do you remember what it was, Kurt? I don't know if it was, it might have even been another distillery in Fort William. There were two that back in the day made both malt and grain. And I suppose we're also ignoring the reality that Alsabe/Gervin could make a single blend, but who's counting? Shall we move on to what I believe is the oldest whiskey in our lineup tonight? Is it the oldest in the lineup tonight? The Roots, the 29-year-old. So Kurt, while I put this up on screen, do you want to romance us on Roshdu, or do we even have that? Was that one of the things that was on your slide?
Possibly, I don't know. This bottling though, so Evan, when I went into work yesterday, threw a kid at me, said, "Hey, do you want to sort out the tasting order for tomorrow?" We tracked down the bottles to make it a little bit easier. Tasted through the lineup, and everything that I'd initially thought it would be, without having tasted them, was completely upended. This lineup was crazy hard to put together, and took 4 different opinions before we got to where we ended up with. But this Rostu, from the moment I tried it, I was like, oh my God, this is the whiskey that's tasting.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this needed to follow these 2 ones that we wanted to romance the hell out of, because this is a real firework on top.
So a lot of Loch Lomond's different spirit styles are usually named for some sort of geographical feature in the vicinity of the Loch Lomond Distillery or the lake. I think one or more of them are named for islands. But Roshdu is interesting because it's a name they used to give to a very fruity style of spirit they made from the 60s until about 2000. So that's why you don't see a lot of Roshdu anymore, because it dates from basically 24 plus years ago now, would be the youngest ones that are still out there. But I believe they also make a style, this is where things get confusing, called Roshdu now, that is actually a grain whiskey. And that's one of the other reasons why you don't see it very often. But it was something that I remember back in the day. We used to get independent bottlings of it from the 60s and 70s that were really cool. And they were just these intensely fruity refill cask whiskeys. They were a bit of a curiosity. I think it was treated almost like a closed distillery by collectors and consumers. but there's never been a lot of it out there. Like I would say most years we'd be lucky to see one independent bottling of Rajdu crop up and come through the shop, maybe two.
I have a bit of a harebrained conspiracy theory on Rajdu and Old Rajdu.
Yeah.
And it has to do with the SWA regs changing so that Rajdu single malt could no longer be called single malt because it was 100% malted barley going through a column still. So they made it call it a grain whiskey. So my assumption is that nothing changed in the style. It's just that after a certain point, when the SWA came out with that ruling or started enforcing it, they could no longer call it a single malt whiskey.
It's interesting because my very shallow deep dive on this doesn't seem to like provide any clarity on that one way or another. But yeah, a confusing array of pot and column and hybrid stills. So, but they're still, this is scotchwhiskey.com, which is still up there, even though they haven't updated it in about 5 years. They're still describing it as a single malt. But in 2007, a continuous still was installed to separate blah, 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 and the 100% malted barley through it. So it seems like maybe, I don't know, maybe they're just calling whiskey like that that's still in their possession Loch Lomond and not Rajdu anymore, because it sounds like it was only after 2007 that they were putting the malt through the column still.
Gotcha.
But maybe the independent bottlers are still calling it Rajdu because that's what's on the barrel or was on the barrel when they acquired it. But the mystery just deepens, Evan.
Yeah.
I'd like to apologize for Jeff's laziness. Normally there would have been an answer for that one right off the
That's right.
wheel today.
Yeah, I'm not sure what he's doing, to be totally honest. So I don't know anything about this independent bottler. Evan, do you actually know about this? Like, I know we've seen one or two things come through the store. This is a 93 vintage, 29 years of age from a hogshead at 50.8.
Yeah, I think this is, and I could be wrong, but I think Roots is actually Canadian owned by a couple people in Ontario.
Oh, well, there you
Could be
go.
wrong.
Did I put that up on the screen yet? Did people get a chance to see that one? I don't remember.
I did. I shared it.
Oh, you shared it. All right. Well, it's good that at least one of us was staying on top of these things. So Kurt, nose, palate, what do we think about this?
This is such a weird whiskey. Like I said, I fell in love with it at first nosing, just trying to sort out the order. I love the notes that are going into the tasting. Evan mentions Boursin because there's that weird kind of like almost pungent earthiness with things like that, but not quite. Like it's kind of brie meets a little bit of earthiness. And then the blue cheese that I absolutely see. It's like clay. I get like the tiniest little hint of like smoke or char or peat or something.
It's definitely, I was going to say there's definitely some smoke there and I don't think it's barrel char. Like I think there's a touch of peat to this. It's earthy, it's fruity, it's mushroomy. Like that's there. There's a note on the nose. I don't know if this is like what the distinct, but there's something that reminds me of like baby poop on the nose. And like Evan, you're closer in time to this than Kurt or I.
I'm about 4 years out on that now, but I can kind of see where you're going. To me, it's like very dunnage driven. Like it's just heavy on those walking into a dunnage warehouse notes.
I think it's for me, it's that note combined with maybe the diaper. Like there's a combination note there. That's kind of hard to pull one or the other of those elements out.
Yeah, I could see that.
It's whiskey. This reminds me of that that peated Glen Keith we talked about several tastings back from the 70s. Really, really great thing. Fruit bomb, clay, earthy, peaches and oranges.
Yeah. Lovely dram. Interesting. Again, probably not everyone's cup of tea, but it's sort of fun and interesting. And I love that it's got those really nice, bright, fruity tones on the palate. It's not overbearing. It's not over anything. It's not over oaked. It's not overly earthy. It's just got a nice overall balance to it.
This is the least the second or third 93 old Rajdu we've seen from an independent bottler over the last
Mhm.
5 or 6 years as well. We had a couple come through with this vintage as well that were not as dunnage heavy from what I recall. A little bit more citrus driven with a lot of passion fruit notes
Mhm.
that were fantastic as well. But I think this one has a bit more depth from what I recall of
Yeah.
those.
Well, I think what's interesting about this is that there's not been a lot. I mean, you don't even in the broader global market, there's not been a lot of old Rashdu bottled. Um, I think it's probably not a coincidence that a lot of those casks were 93. It's probably a parcel that the
Yeah.
distillery sold off when they needed money. And there's a couple of times when that could have happened. Like they had a fire in 97, destroyed 300,000 liters of maturing whiskey. Um, you know, the 80s and 90s were not a good time for the industry. There were several different changes of ownership from the 80s through the 90s, the 2000s. And interestingly, it was acquired by a private equity company, which was itself then acquired by a Chinese management company in 2019. So I shocked Kurt with the news that we were drinking Chinese-owned whiskey tonight. So there you
Yeah,
go.
I wasn't aware of that as well. I knew about the private equity thing, and I think that's where we started to see the turnaround with him personally.
Right. But I'm
But
wondering if the new investment guys overpaid for the old investment guys, and that's why Little Mill 25-year-old you can still buy, but it's $6,000.
yeah,
So
well,
that's the
if
only way to
you
pay off the investments.
if you think back to those first and second Little Mill bottlings, they were hilariously bad for their
Oh,
look and their printing and stuff like that. I remember the second edition when we got it. I was at Willow Park at the time, and they had multiple typos on the bottle, and the
do you
vintage was
mean do
marked.
you mean these bottles, Evan?
Yeah, I believe the vintage was marked differently on the box than it was on the bottle, if I remember
Oh,
correctly.
cool. Well, I mean, I don't think, well, there's something left in one of them, but I just keep them around because they are kind of cool.
Yeah,
The, the
it's
first one
like
was also,
they
go ahead,
took bottles of Chivas Revolve and then scraped those off and put Little Mill on it.
just black, painted them black.
Yeah.
Um, the first one I remember being shockingly cheap and it came in the worst boxes. And
Hmm.
then the second one was like outrageously more expensive than the first.
Yep.
And then
Cracker.
what's that, Kurt?
That first one was awesome.
Yeah. I don't think we have Benoit on here, who I believe is, at least as far as I know, the world's foremost expert on Little Mill. But yeah, it's a distillery I struggled with, but that's not why we're here. We're not here to talk about Little Mill. Evan, you might as well stay on for this because the next one is the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, or one of two Scotch Malt Whisky Society bottlings, G15.34, which I can put up on the screen here.
Yeah, so this one is called Diet Pete. This, if I remember correctly, outturn wise, this came, was it April or May or something like that? But I think this was an outturn with two different Loch Lomond grains in it, and they both showed vastly different. Diet Pete is kind of a hilarious name, and Kurt was getting the peat off it yesterday, but I found the peat on this one. It should have been called anemic peat because it's very very thin, even by Loch Lomond standards. That I've had much more peated grains than this one from their lineup from the society. But it's neat to see that sort of like full on grain driven spirit on this one with just a little bit of peat. I remember when I first tried it in the society outturn, there wasn't a whole lot of anything beyond grain on the nose for me and some chocolatey notes, but maybe it will have changed since then.
The yeah, the peat is hard to pick up on the nose for sure. It's much more present on the palate. Um, I think you'd have a hard time. And man, the smoke, I don't know that Diet Peat is accurate on this because it's actually quite peaty on the palate. Although there is something that reminds me of Diet Coke on the profile. So maybe
I was
that's
thinking,
where the name came from.
I actually get like a as soon as I nosed it, I got like a ginger ale, 7-Up kind of effervescent.
Hmm.
Yeah, I can see where you're going ginger ale wise.
It's shockingly good. I didn't expect it to be as good as it is. And I think there's an absolute blinder in the industry right now to a huge buying public that's okay with a little bit of, and they say that when they come in all the time, but there's hardly anything in the market that's lightly, lowly kind of peated. You know, you can go to Oban, you can go to Talisker, Springbank. Good luck. You can get your hands on
And
something.
some of the Ben Romics, maybe.
Ardmore, but there's only a handful. But I think if we saw more that were sitting at the 2 ppm to maybe 15 ppm, it'd be a lot more people, and maybe this is a bad thing, but would be okay with peated whiskey. But
I really wonder though, I mean, because I don't, to me on the palate, maybe on the nose, but on the palate, this doesn't come across as lightly peated. Like this seems quite heavily peated on the palate.
it seems light to me. I'm kind of with Evan on that one.
Yeah. Yeah, to me, like I get the peat on the palate, but it's still more into the spiciness that comes along with it, and it's also on the drier side as well. How it's not that old, from what I recall. It's like an 8-year-old, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah.
To me though, I think the coolest thing about this whiskey is that, and it's underneath that sort of ashy, biscuity peat, is these caramel tones and the fruit. Those are the most interesting notes to me in the whiskey. But I don't know, maybe it's my palate, maybe it's today. It seems more heavily peated than diet peat to my taste, but it's a
I like
lovely
that.
whiskey. It's great, and it certainly punches above where I think most of us would have thought it would in a single malt range.
Yeah, it totally
I like
does. I think this is actually showing better than it did in the outturn. Sorry, go ahead, Kurt.
No, just complimenting Andrew on that note, that biscuity note he mentioned. It's a really good for it.
So this is a cool whiskey. I mean, I would love to know if we can get a cask of something like this. Like that would be fun to bottle. Something really different. Okay, Evan, do you want to lead us into Free as a Bee as well?
Yeah, so going from memory, Free as a Bee is a lot of fun as well. It's a 22-year-old from 2000 in a completely different grain style than Diet Peat. Diet Peat was peated. I think it might have been their Rajdu style, what they consider their Rajdu style now.
You mean new Rajdu?
New Rajdu. They should call it
Yeah.
New Rajdu. That'd be kind of cool. But this is stuff that we did get bottlings of way back when in their silk screened era. When you got the Loch Lomond organic single grain, this is essentially the same stuff. This is a 22-year-old version of that, and it is actually a singular grain. It's 100% organic wheat that ran through a column still for this one.
Cool.
It's so rich on the nose.
Yeah.
So rich.
It's got almost like goes into this oily Riesling note for me. Really
Yeah,
nutty.
I can see that. Yeah, it's got that little bit of, but both sweet, but also kind of diesely tone to it. I was hoping
like
or I was hoping Whiskey Base might have more clarity on the spirit style, but they're just calling it single grain from Loch Lomond. So
yeah. I actually think I don't know if you could search it up, but the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society, and I think I referenced it in a couple of our whiskey calendars a couple of years back, but actually did a pretty good write-up on their reasoning for giving different grain numbers and different single malt numbers for the different styles and explaining what those styles were.
Oh, interesting.
we've never bottled a grain, have we, Andrew?
Yeah, we did actually. We did one with Igor. It was like a 1970 something grain whiskey from Whiskey Agency. It wasn't a lot, like I think it was 70 bottles, 72 bottles, but we did get to bottle a grain. One.
Man, the palate on this comes off as older than it is, in my opinion.
Great.
It goes really waxy. It's got these great cedar notes which come off on older grain for me.
Mhm.
Almost like you're licking the wall of an old sauna, in a good way.
It's so honeyed, it's so fruity and soft. That waxy tone is quite prominent. You know, for me, I struggled the nose. The nose I found was a little shy. Like there's just not. I get the alcohol on it. I get it's toasty. I'm not getting a ton of notes off the nose, but the palate on this is just so expressive.
That's dessert.
Yeah, dessert, but also drying, as well as being juicy at the same time.
So is this, Evan? Is this an Auslese or a Trockenbeeren Auslese?
Boy, that's a toughie.
It's probably just an Auslese because I think Trockenbeeren Auslese is sweeter.
Yeah, maybe a Spätlese where they've chapitalized it.
Just
They've
a
added
Spätlese.
Yeah.
So,
Jeremy's note in the comments there about gingerbreads. For me, it's like stale gingerbread almost, not like good, fresh, chewy gingerbread, but like
It was just making me think about like chewing on a stale gingerbread house, taking the walls down.
That's a good note.
the more you get into it, the more spicy it gets. And the gingerbread note, and maybe all this talk of Riesling in Germany, made me think more of like, you know, that German spelt bread, that really, really heavy, thick stuff. There's like something like that on the palate, like just a dark, grainy note.
It's like you took a wall down on that gingerbread house in January, and you dipped it in chamomile tea with honey.
There you go.
So I'm not a grain guy. Any of us are really grain guys at heart. The 3-4 of us Kensington here right now. But this, if I'm drinking a grain, this is the kind of grain. There's a lot of personality.
Mhm.
There's so many of them that are literally like walking through the lumber section at Home Depot or something like that. It's just that sprucey, piney kind of note and nothing else. This one's got a lot more fruits, like I said, a lot of creaminess and stuff. Neat grain, really neat.
I think the coolest thing about doing the so far is it's really sort of, even though it's different styles, it's kind of giving me a concept of how I see the Loch Lomond style being at the same time, where they, even at a young age, they seem to get these incredible tropical fruit notes and citrus notes in there that not a lot of other distilleries manage.
I'm struggling for moisture in my mouth though.
Yeah, it's so dry. That's
So
I had my beer here because it needed to refresh the palate. I think it's a great whiskey, very interesting. Stands up very well in a lineup of otherwise malt whiskeys. So very cool. Next up is a return to the core range, Loch Lomond 14. We threw this in the lineup because I don't think any of us had even tried it before. This came in maybe just before or just after Christmas, and I know we did another Loch Lomond hybrid Glen Scotia tasting way back when, but we didn't feature this in it. So curious to see how this comes across. And there's something kind of a little bit dirty about this off the bat.
Evan caught me because I was gonna put this at the beginning of the lineup, having not tasted it. I thought it was just gonna be a fruity Loch Lomond. I had no idea. And thank God Evan like stuck out his foot and tripped me on this one.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Andrew.
No, I was gonna say, so Evan, what intelligence did you have on this whiskey that's not on our website that we need to update?
Yeah, so Loch Lomond with their official bottlings right now are essentially doing 3 different styles. I think they are actually doing some single grains beyond that, but I'm not gonna get into that right now. They've streamlined their official bottlings. Instead of having their 11 different names of styles, they're going with Inchmirren, which is light and fruity. Loch Lomond, which kind of runs the balance where it's got some fruit notes in it, but it goes a bit meatier and peatier. And then Inchmoen, which is their very peated, more meaty style, where it sort of steps back from those fruit notes and goes into those big burly notes instead. So Loch Lomond, if you see an official Loch Lomond bottle, you should always expect, at least from what I've seen so far, some fruit, and then some peat.
Hmm. Interesting. Well, that's some interesting intelligence, Evan, and that should probably be in a future newsletter.
Yeah, I don't know if you should be saying intelligence and Evan in the same sentence so many times, but I'll take it.
We're going to find ways to do that more often, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know. The nose on it is cool. Like it is, as you said, a hybrid of some of those fruitier tones, but then this seamier, dirty kind of peat profile to it. And even though it's not related, it reminded me for a brief moment of a very specific neighborhood in Edinburgh. Evan, like, did we get to Edinburgh when you were there?
Just for one night, so it was a very abbreviated stop.
Right. So we probably didn't go to Brewdog and then just for humor's sake, because it's called this, walk past the pubic triangle.
No, we didn't. We
So
didn't do that triangle.
The pubic triangle is a three-way intersection in Edinburgh, which has strip clubs on three sides of the streets. And that's why it's called that. And Edinburgh's nickname is Old Reekie. And like, even though it's this beautiful stone medieval city, it also has kind of a seamy underside to it too. So for whatever reason, when I smelled this, it just made me think of that intersection. Even though I've never been in any of those buildings, I've just humorously admired them from the outside. It made me think of that. I don't know why.
I'm sure my wife is happy that I didn't come home until we dove into the pubic triangle while we were in
Andrew
Scotland.
took me to the pubic triangle.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's got this weird combination of dim sum and dog biscuits on the nose, where it's like slightly meaty, but also like everything's wrapped in like banana leaf and has some milk bone dog biscuit notes to it as well.
Evan, the dim sum is bang on. Jen likes to buy us. I mean, I like to eat these steamed barbecue pork buns.
Yeah.
From TNT Market that you reheat in the microwave. She doesn't eat meat, so she also gets the mushroom ones. So it's like a hybrid of the barbecue pork and the mushroom at the same time. I highly recommend the barbecue pork ones, not so much the mushroom ones.
I like that ashy smokiness. I like that there's still the profile of the distillery behind it. And I think that's kind of where Jeremy's going with that. That bit of rotting fruit. I think that's the Inchmere and profile in that long fermentation and funkiness. That rotting fruit, if you think of it like banana bread and all that kind of stuff, like the deeper flavor being at the verge of rotting. Yeah, like Jamaica, right? Like the rums and dunder and muck and stuff. I actually like this more than I thought I would. It's dirty and it's ashy. It's still kind of cool.
It is. It's a really, really neat whiskey. And this is kind of what I fell in love with the Loch Lomond 18 years ago, as I was talking about in our whiskey calendar, where it just had so many different things wrapped up in a whiskey that you wouldn't expect to come all in one bottle. And a lot of that probably has to do with them blending a bunch of different styles to create the official Loch Lomond style right now. But I'm all for it. There's so many different distilleries that do that without even saying it. I mean, what we know of Dalmore and Jura and essentially where they use different styles of stills to create one official style of spirit. It happens all the time. It's just with Loch Lomond, if you open up the book or go to their website or do a tasting, you'll be able to delve into it and come up with more questions afterwards, which makes it more exciting.
Well, and maybe the reality with them is that, you know, even though they're not trying to hide from anything, it's just there's so much complexity. Like the fact they're still making 9 spirit styles is sort of mind-boggling. And I think there's something also about it where both the Loch Lomond 18 and 14 have this profile that's like, take it or leave it. Like if you don't like it, go drink something else. Like that's kind of the profile style that it seems to have to me.
It's crazy that they managed to create all these different styles and be so schizophrenic with or sorry, maybe more into multiple personalities, even though they've gone through all these different ownership changes. Yet still managed to make like really good whiskey along with all those different personalities and continue to make all those different styles instead of like honing in on one or two and narrowing things down. It can't be just like commercially like the best way to go about doing things.
Well, the only other distillery that I think comes even close to replicating this is Hakushu in Japan,
Yeah.
where I think they've got 4 different wash stills, 4 different spirit stills, and they'll use them in different combinations to try to create different spirit profiles in addition to fermentation. And yeah, I mean, there's not really anyone else out there that's doing this. And yeah, going back to, we didn't really talk about this, or maybe you guys did when I had my brief time out, but like one of the things that makes blended whiskeys when they're good is that you're taking all these different components and trying to make something better than the individual elements. When it's at its best, its purest form, that's what it is. And when you have a distillery that's got 9 different components that you can blend together and still call a single malt, before you're even talking about oak or cask types or how many times they've been refilled, that's pretty crazy that you have that much variety from which to build something.
Yeah. Yeah, it's from the outset, like, and we've referenced Willy Wonka-esque quite a few times in the past and in this tasting already, but what shocks me about it more than anything is that you'd expect this to come out of like one eccentric scientist or billionaires sort of like mind's eye, and yet there's nobody that seems to be force of all of this happening with Loch Lomond, like not one specific person.
Mm-hmm. Kurt, did you have anything to add?
Well, I think Evan's point about the quality across all the spirit types, I think that kind of speaks to, the takeover period, probably a change to a lot of the distillation regime, maybe adjusting the cuts and stuff. Because when you dial in your spirit, however you use that spirit, you've got good spirit. Then it comes down to the wood, right? But if your spirit cut is going to be shit, fix your spirit cut. I think that's probably what they've done. Is, man, the last decade or so of Loch stuff has been pretty rad.
All right. Transition time. We've got one more whiskey. It's a different spirit style. It's Crofton Guia. Is it? I shouldn't even mention this. Crofton Guia. This is from Whiskey Trail, from Elixir Distillers, 53.2%, 2006 vintage, 15 years old, hogshead cask. I frankly can't believe we still have this whiskey for multiple reasons. Like,
Yep.
I absolutely love this label.
Yep.
Like, because if you've been to Loch Lomond, like, I don't know, and what was that Fraggle Rock? It's kind of like Fraggle Rock is taking place on the label there. And anyway, I also remember when this came in, I did a tasting note from it. I don't know, maybe my tasting note scared people off because I think I implied that this was like insanely weird, but awesome at the same time. And maybe that was too much for people, but man, I really like this one last whiskey. It's been a while since I've had it. Actually, it's probably been about a year since I've last had it.
Yeah, it's so funky and fun. It's like dipping like a smoky s'more into French onion soup.
Well, I think this is like an assorted dim sum plate on, and you've got some soy sauce in there. You've got your steamed pork buns. You've got, I don't know, shrimp dumplings, all kinds of things coming up all at once.
Those are some cool notes, and I agree with pretty much everything you guys just threw at it. But there's also a little bit of a garbagey Steve.
Yep.
Well, it's got that plastic note. It's got and like a little bit of like burning plastic wires.
Yeah.
It reminds me of burning bags of garbage where you burn through the plastic.
It's probably why I glommed onto Loch Lomond in the first place. Is it's the only weirder style can come out of this distillery than that isn't Lecheg.
Somehow I find this slightly less offensive than Lecheg.
Yeah. It's because it's not all tire fire. There's other stuff going on in there too.
God bless this drink that we talk about cow shit and baby things like that, and we're all talking about how much we these things.
Yeah. It
Amazing.
still has, I think I said chlorine pool yesterday with Kurt, and it still has a bit of that to it too, and just this weird briny note that goes through it all.
Yeah. It yeah. My original note, this is more than a little unusual, but it is also excellent. This malt is not for the whiskey drinker who knows what they like and purchase that same bottle time in and time out. It is for the anorak who is always on the hunt for something different but good. I think that one kind of sums this one up for me. But
No,
to be fair, it
I
also
totally
sums
agree.
up the 14 that we just had before it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's can you imagine someone that was just like Delmore cigar malts, my
Or
whiskey.
Glenfiddich 12, which by the way is
Yeah.
like a decent whiskey, like it's well made. But if you came in looking for Glenfiddich 12 and you bought this,
Yeah.
you would be pretty gutted. Either that or you have no taste buds and you just like it doesn't matter. One of those two things.
Yeah. It's got a shrimp and cocktail sauce going on right now too.
Well, that's my shrimp dumpling
Yeah.
from before.
There's a touch of horseradish in there too, which is just crazy.
But I don't know if we're just on this Asian thing because the Chinese own it, but like I'm even getting like steamed bok choy.
That might be that composty kind of thing. Yeah.
Kurt, bok choy can be good.
Oh dude, I was a vegetarian for a long time. Any vegetable, I'll eat them all.
Yeah.
All
Bok
right.
choy is like eggplant, where it's about what it carries. It's not about the thing itself.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Evan, you might as well stick around for the speed round.
Yeah.
So, and Kurt, did you explain this angels, tears, and devil's deeds thing? Like
No, there was a lot of titles and stuff bandied around from different people and
you
stuff.
didn't write a song, did you? Did you write a song about this whiskey?
No, but maybe I should.
Yeah.
No, it was
Kurt.
just cheap. The name of the club is the Syndicate, Sin with a I, not a Y. So we were looking for something to kind of play on the theme. That's what was ultimately decided.
Yeah. My theory is that you guys just couldn't get like that as an emoji on the label, so you put that in.
So custardy on the nose now.
Yeah. Yeah, custard and bubble tea.
So good.
Creamy with some, again, I think like a little touch of barrel char in there. Loch Lomond, the Kensington one, the other 10-year-old, the sister cask.
That's just a little bit more spicy on the palate and a little bit more wood driven and robust.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, sweet, loads of vanilla, toasty, some nice fruit tones there too. What about the Roshdu? Old Roshdu.
Okay.
Sorry, Kurt?
I like that those two have kind of diverged a little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit in the glass. The KWM one is even darker and richer, and the Sin one seems a little bit lighter still. There's quite a difference in profile now.
Yeah, Roshdu.
Right now, the nose is like you found an open bag of Twizzlers in the back of the warehouse.
Well, I think that bag of Twizzlers, though, somehow got contaminated with Flintstone vitamins.
Oh, that's a good call.
And the chewy part of licorice all sorts without the licorice, just those pillowy bits of chewy stuff.
That's just called sugar, Kurt.
Yep.
Jeff says cherry Danish, big time cherry notes like that. I'm assuming what was likely an Ex-Bourbon barrel or hogshead. I didn't look, but I think that's coming to the fore right now.
I think cherry Danish is a good call on that, actually.
It's leaving a linger like I've just had a cigar, like an unlit cigar.
let's go on to Diet Pete. I just realized I don't think I shared the link for the Crofton Gia, so I'll put that into the chat. How is Diet Pete faring?
It's
And
really
I'm trying to figure out what I'm getting on the nose there. There's some.
It's aspartame.
it's very much that like pop, like I said earlier, ginger ale or like 7-Up or something. But there's
No,
also
there's like a sugar-free gum note to the nose.
But
I
there's
get shake.
also it's like you poured water on a running circuit board. Like it's just like got this like metallic, slightly smoky and chemical note to it.
Like Johnny Five somehow got too close to the bathtub. Is that?
That's right. That's right. Still alive though.
You date yourself with every one of those references, and then I date myself laughing at them because I recognize.
Yeah.
I don't care. It's still like super mushroomy on the palate. Like,
It is
It's neat.
very mushroomy.
It's really neat though. That one's a cool one.
yeah, agreed. All right, free as a bee.
The nose is simple compared to the palate, but I love it. It's just honeyed and waxy with a little bit of oak spice.
Yeah, I mean,
Real, real waffles.
like, do you say Stroop waffles?
I said treacle on like real waffles, like
Oh,
Belgian waffles.
Waffles
See,
was mentioned though.
I was thinking Stroop waffles, which as a cyclist is something like they're these great compact things for eating while you're riding a bike. Um, reminds me that it's not insanely complex, but it's delicious.
Agreed.
Okay. Loch Lomond 14. Oh man.
Cola, and there's something that reminds me of like hospital supplies on the nose now.
Yeah, and hot chocolate powder.
It's a little sweaty.
Mm.
That's a good.
Have you had the marbled Guinness cheese before?
Yep.
No.
It's got a bit of that on the nose.
Where do you get that?
Uh, I'm sure there, like I doubt Peasant has it. Springbank might have it. I've had it before though at tastings even.
Marbled Guinness cheese.
Yeah, yeah, it's Guinness infused, so it's got like the veins are essentially a bit of Guinness beer that they injected into it.
Okay. Interesting. I don't know if that's fancy or not, Evan. Kurt's saying not. He's weighing in not fancy. Is that a poll question? Do we have a poll question set up for that?
Oh, we have a third question that I'm pretty happy with.
All right.
It's a long
Well, I
one
look
though.
forward to it. We're almost there. We got one last whiskey to sort of speed round. But yeah, that like Loch Lomond. I don't think I like the 14 as much as I do the 18, but it's
Mhm.
pretty interesting.
Yeah, it hasn't quite gotten that sweet and sour note down the way the 18 does.
Yeah. All right. Crofton Gia. Whiskey Trail Silhouette.
If there is such a thing as chalky French onion soup, that's what it is.
Like if they could somehow make French onion soup a jelly belly, like that's
Yeah,
what it would be.
or this is the French onion soup that you get at the space station, like it's dehydrated French onion soup, powdered.
No, it's a dip, Evan. It's a powdered dip. You got to lick the stick. It's a dipstick. You got to
That's right.
dip that French onion soup. That's lovely.
I struggle with that one.
I don't know. For me, it's a bit of a dark horse.
Yeah, it's the Three Faces of Eve whiskey, where it's like you pick it up and nose it, and you like tomorrow you'll get something completely different, but it'll still be the same whiskey.
Well, anyway, it's time to vote. polls. Here we
Yeah.
go. Launch. So you've got a couple of minutes to pick your favorites. Favorite whiskey, second favorite whiskey, and then Evan's third question. Which of the following has not been used as a name for a Loch Lomond whiskey? Oh, it's a trick question.
Oh, hell.
Okay, interesting. I mean, Evan is the truth holder here, so he knows the answer to the question. We'll have to see how people vote in the end. While
No
we're doing
Googling,
that,
Jeff.
Evan, I'm going to put you on the spot first. Two favorites from tonight's tasting. Three. We always do three.
Yeah, it's tough not to pick 7, honestly, because it's just this has been such a wonderful like tour through like one room in Loch Lomond, not the entire house, essentially. I was saying to Kurt while you were gone, like I don't think you can get a whole concept of what Loch Lomond is in just 7 glasses. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Because they do so many different styles. But my probably the Roots Old Rajdu is my first favorite. The Crofton Gia Whiskey Trail is my second favorite. And I'm going to avoid the single casks, even though I really enjoy both of them, and pick the SMWSG 9.8, the 100% wheated organic grain whiskey.
Wow. Evan, very diplomatic, insightful. Kurt,
Got to go with the first 3. I'm not sure what order I put them in, but I loved all.
first 3.
Yeah. That Rostu 29 was such a shocker for me.
Yeah.
But so was the 8-year-old Diet Pete. That was a crazy whiskey tonight. I had a lot of fun with that one.
Yeah.
I think just overall quality, the first 3.
So I'm torn because dollars to donuts. The first 2, I think, stand out for sure. Although,
Absolutely.
I mean, what was the price on that Loch Lomond 14? It's like $85 or something, isn't it? It's,
The 14?
yeah, $85 in the, the parlance of the kids today. It's, well, not really, of yesteryear. It's cheap as chips. I liked it, and I really like those casks, but I think I'm with Evan here. I'm gonna go like a little bit off piste. The Roots Rajdu is my number 1 favorite for sure. The Free as a Bee grain, I think of all these ones, it's probably one of the ones I'd actually drink and like be happy to drink without thinking about it, like maybe in place of a beer. And I'm gonna go with the Diet Pete for my third pick because I just think it's interesting. And I've got a lot of whiskeys that are great or good or average or better than average. I think those 3 were like the most unique. So the casts are great. Those are my 3 picks.
I like how the 3 of us kind of make a Venn diagram where we are still slightly outside of each other. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, it would be very easy for me to say the Kensington cask was the best one, but like as good as it is, I mean, how do you surpass a 29-year-old whiskey that was intended to be insanely fruity? Like you can't. So anyway, the voting. Let's see where we're at. One of you has not voted. You have 30 seconds to complete voting, or we're just going to move on and share the results. While we're waiting for that, anything either of you guys want to add? Oh, I did mention this, the Loch Lomond sinDicate cask, if you'd like a bottle or 2, it is up online. It's available for purchase along with the 18 remaining bottles of the Kensington cask. But other than that, Evan, Kurt, anything you want to add?
Well, maybe we should pimp the other tastings we have coming up that have launched, but that's about it.
Yeah, I think we started with that. Trust me, the Turntables whiskey on Friday, that's going to be a good tasting. Better Care next week will be awesome. And then the berries one at the end of the month. The double headers, the 4x2 double headers, are going to be a lot of fun. We've tried to keep our summer tastings fun and, you know, not stodgy, but I suppose they might still be stodgy. I don't know. Kurt, you sort of looked like you were going to say something and then stopped.
Yeah, I have a lot of love for this distillery now. So I got to thank Evan for that. And I got to thank Marlene, who's not here tonight. Her and Spencer were great to deal with too. They treated us like gold there. And you guys should know how good this company is to work with locally. And when we went over there,
Yeah.
I'll keep this really brief, but they had this gentleman named Gary Mills show up to meet us, Loch Lomond. We spent the day with him. He spoiled the hell out of us, like absolutely ridiculous time there, hours, and gold treatment. We toured around Scotland for a few more days, went to Islay, went down to Campbellton, and when we showed up at Glen Scotia for our tour, Gary had actually flown across to Campbellton, and he opened the door at the distillery as we walked up and said, "Good to see you again, boys." He spent the entire day with us there again, took us out for lunch, bought us drams, bought us beers, everything. Flew back to Glasgow with us, the whole deal. Like, it was literally like he dedicated his entire time to us the entire time we were with him, just to foot the bill, to make sure we got to try the coolest stuff in the warehouses, take care of us like the thing. So this company are rock stars. Really, really cool.
Awesome. Yeah. Evan, did you have something either endearing or
so I haven't been to Loch Lomond yet, which means I need to go back to Scotland at some point. But Glen Scotia was a highlight of a trip full of highlights when I went back in 2019 for the first and only time so far. But Springbank was fantastic. But if you go to Campbelltown just for Springbank, do yourself a favor and visit Loch Lomond as well.
Glen Scotia.
Glen Scotia, thank you. Yeah, visit Loch Lomond while you're in Campbelltown if you can. But Glen Scotia, when we were there, it's Ian McAllister, I think it is the master distiller. I keep on thinking he's going to end up going somewhere else because I've heard rumors, but I don't know if that's going to happen or not. But he is a fantastic guy and kind of like helms the ship at Glen Scotia, and has done a fantastic job over on that side of things. So if you get a chance to meet him, shake his hand and say thank you, because he's doing great work at Glen Scotia as well.
Yeah. All right, here are the results, which you'll be able to see for a moment. The Rochedu, #1 favorite tonight. Not too surprising, and I feel sort of vindicated that the Whiskey Trail Crofton Gia was #2. The Kensington Cask tied for third with G9.8, and then the sinDicate Cask. And then for second favorite, look at that, the sinDicate Cask storming ahead. G9.8, free as a bee, and then a tie between the Kensington Cask and Diet Pete. And then in answer to Evan's question, which whiskey style has not been a name for Loch Lomond? Oh man, I didn't realize there was a whole bunch of others.
Yeah, there's an inside joke that if you read Whiskey Fun and have for a long time, then you'll be able to pick it out there, and most people did there.
It was Glen Wonka. Whereas
Yeah.
some people, I don't know that. I think some people might have seen Klansman and clicked on that because they didn't see the options below it.
Yeah.
Glengarry, that's funny. There's some good ones there. Craig Lodge should be a brand. That's a good.
Yeah, they've used a stupid amount of names over the years, since 1964 only, but over the years.
Exactly. Well, it was a fun range tonight, gentlemen. Thank you very much for that. Thank you everybody for taking part. I hope you enjoyed tonight's tasting. Hopefully we'll see you at another one in the not too distant future. But until then, I hope you all have a great night, and yeah, take care. Till next time.